Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing down there in Orange County?
We're doing great. I mean, come on, Matthew. We were at the premiere of Acolyte. We had our Star Wars best. We got to see all the stars. We took pictures. No, we weren't there actually.
Too bad I didn't use the Iron Canon Instagram account. Too bad I'm not on the ball on that because you could have seen proof. That
No, we weren't there, folks. We weren't there.
There we go. This week, so next week, definitely some Home for High Republic, but this week, in-depth discussion on the canon because we're talking about John Jackson Miller, 10 years of canon. So yeah, John Jackson Miller's A New Dawn came out in September 2014. That was followed a few months later by the first batch of Marvel comic runs in January 2015. Of course, the on-screen spotlight was the premiere of Star Wars Rebels in October 2014, and of course everything culminated again, of course, with The Force Awakens in December of 2015. So since then, it's kind of up. And right in the description, right off the top, we've had 5 films. We've had, five films. I believe 3 animated shows, 3, I think, series of animated shorts, season 7 of the Clone Wars, 4 live action shows, 4 video games, 4 audio dramas, and far too many adult novels, comics, YA novels, all ages comics, young reader books, etc. for me to count. I'm sure Wikipedia has the full count for you. But as we come to the end of Star Wars month, we look back on almost a decade of the Disney canon so far. But before we do that, I gotta get plugs out of the way. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. You can follow us on Instagram and Threads. I need to plan things out. I need to plan better. Follow us on at Iron Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Of course, you can follow the flagship at the SWU for everything they're sharing there, including of the Acolyte and the countdown to the Acolyte on Tuesday, June 4th. Here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships and we got super chats. So please do support the channel, support the network. Much greatly appreciated. If you comment below, feel free to comment below. And we'll get to it if we can, especially if it fits in the flow of our conversation. It's kind of how I like to do things. But also, if you do super chat, you're guaranteed to get on the spotlight there. And Joel, you can't do super chats on your own podcast. I'm sorry to say. There you go. But yeah, it's been a fun time here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. We're gonna keep it going, of course, on the other socials. You can get audio only Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So Spotify changed up how they do the login process, and so I need to sort that out. But all episodes except for last week's and then this week's are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please do search Iron Canon Pod or Iron Canon Podcast for that if audio is more your speed. Star Wars Underworld Discord. Sorry, as I think you yawn. Star Wars Underworld Discord. We got conversations going. Full blore, gangbusters, all the other metaphors you want, just in there, talking all sorts of things. Star Wars, Star Wars canon, Star Wars legends, the Underworld show chat, ask your questions for the Underworld show, all that stuff. Got to think of a good troll question this week. I got to do that. But and then we've got events happening, game nights and movie nights, and what's happening there, Joel?
Let's see. We had a few game nights this weekend. We played Overwatch and we played Fortnite. This week we're probably gonna be pretty quiet, and as for next week, I haven't decided what we want to do just yet.
And from what I understand, some of them are scheduled and some of them are kind of ad hoc. They're like, "Hey, want to fire this up?"
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, check that out. I've been meaning to. But Joel, you and Ben are there almost all the time, right? So
yes.
There we go. Speaking of things I do mean to do every week. Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays. Continuing the paper canon fun here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube network and podcast network rather. Tractor Beam Comics Reviews. Chris Abbott and I. Chris Abbott with his newly resurrected computer review the comics that that had come out that day, and this coming Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's a doozy. You got 4 books coming out, including 2 High Republic Adventures books. So that'll be fun. All of them. This is something I noticed. All of them are set. I think all of them are set before the Phantom Menace.
Oh, that's
2
cool.
of them High Republic era, so in Phase 3 of High Republic. Yeah. Then there's the Darth Maul, Black, White, and Red, and Jango Fett #3. And those are, I believe, Jango Fett is also set before the Phantom Menace. So, continuing the Phantom Menace to 25 party in comic book form. I think the schedule worked out that way. But I gotta still wave the prequelist flag when I can, and I do. I mean, I do all the time. But gotta wave when I can, especially on Tractor Beam, where comics, the bulk of the focus for now, coming to the end of it, but the focus for now is still on the minutes, the hours, the weeks, the days leading up to Return of the Jedi. And so when there's things years or centuries before the Phantom Menace, I'm going to chat about it too. So looking forward to that. Catch us again this Wednesday right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube
Wouldn't
channel.
that be hilarious if we got like a comic that's just like, sorry about that, death making food, like
That's
the
right.
last 24 hours before Return of the Jedi? That would be something.
That might be the plan. I mean, again, Chris and I last week were talking about playing with the Battle of Tanab, and that's probably issue number 50 of the ongoing. But that's a whole other conversation that you can catch Chris and I. Joel, we can maybe talk about it at the end of this episode. It's pretty relevant, I think, to everything where these 10 years of canon comics especially have ended up. So yeah, check out Tractor Beam Comics Reviews again Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, and wherever you get all these socials and places, Facebook and Twitch and Twitter. You get your podcasts and watch your video podcasts. See my Let's Go Oilers and see Percy. Hang out with Percy there. Alrighty. Let's dive right in. Again, we're dispensing with the This Week in Star Wars because we're going full podcast area as Joel mentioned off the top. The Acolyte premiere. Acolyte premiered. I forget what day it was. What day was it?
I don't remember. It
was a few days ago.
A few days ago. It was last week.
It was a few days ago. Really, really cool. Seemed like a really cool Star-Sided event. I'm not salty that you weren't invited. I have things to do this weekend. Joel, you go ahead and be salty. It's fine. My
Still
thought
not
is
invited to people's parties. Almost 30 and still not invited.
Okay. See that's sad. That somebody invite this guy to a party. Invite this guy to a party. It looked like a fun event, and I think the thing that both of us really picked up on, especially all the Luminous authors showing up, High Republic in full force, the High Republic fandom. I don't know if it was quite like celebration with all the cosplayers, but definitely wonderful to see all the Luminous authors there and honored and given their due. Kevin Scott and Charles Soule in a bespoke suit. That's what you want. And also, yeah, I mean, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of influencers,
Ahsoka cast as well.
Yeah, the Ahsoka cast, all that. The usual suspects, but also, and this is what I'm getting at, a lot of the paper canon. There's kind of on social media. There's a paper canon, a book comic community, especially books community for Star Wars Bookstagram, and they were there. If you guys think this stat reads, I think was his name. He was there, and of course, I mean, Alex from Star Wars Explained is both screen and paper, and he's done. Alex and Molly have done plenty of work for both, and so yeah, great to see this coming together and this celebration. I think, and that's one of the things this is telling me is that the show. Yeah, we can talk about when how much effect the actual books, the High Republic Initiative is going to have on this story. We know there's one character in it, one green skin character that we've seen get more lines in trailers. But if anything, at the very least, it's going to be a celebration of the thing we've been saying for 2.5 years now. All these stories in all throughout paper canon are just spectacular work. There's been a few duds here and there, but by and large, just really well crafted really professional storytelling across the board. And in High Republic, I mean, yeah, we some of us have our quibbles, some people have their quibbles by High Republic, but celebration of everything they've achieved as they're a year out from finishing wrapping up this whole hugely ambitious initiative that I think we can say by and large they've pulled off. Again, if you have your quibbles or disagreements, but by and large, pulling off this sweeping grand story, especially this guy having his part to play, and yeah, just to see it get its due, to see the books get their due, because let's face it, for a while there's this question. It is second tier, it is third tier in terms of Lucasfilm's focus, and certainly because the money involved, obviously. So yeah, again, that's even more so to say that's nice to see that celebration of High Republic, of the novels and comics that have gone on over the last 10 years that we're going to talk about in part, and we're going to talk about everything today. But yeah, that, and then yeah, Joel, you mentioned. Oh, first of all, I'll get your thoughts on the authors and what that might represent as a celebration of whatnot, and then you've dared to look at reviews. I haven't, so
Well, the reviews are like
yeah.
the typical, they don't
Yeah.
really say anything
Mhm.
kind of review. Trust me,
That's
there's
right.
no Darth Plagueis in episode 1. I know, trust me, there's nothing like that.
Still not doing it, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad they got invited. I don't know if they've ever been invited. I mean, I don't know if like book authors get invited to big premieres of other things. I don't really pay attention.
I don't think to this extent. Maybe I know Charles was at the She-Hulk premiere. He was a
Okay.
consultant on it, and he wrote
Okay.
the comic, one of the comics that inspired it. But
Okay. So
yeah,
that's good to know. I mean, yeah, I mean that's She-Hulk. I mean, I'm talking about Star Wars. Like, they like ever show up in Andor or like
I don't think
Mandalore?
so. Not to this extent. Not the whole gaggle, the whole
I mean,
gang.
yeah. So I mean, I'm glad they got invited. I mean, they
Mhm.
definitely they're due. Whether or not the show actually, affects how people view the High Republic is like, well, we'll have to see in a couple weeks. Um, in terms of like getting more people to read the High Republic books, or like if there's like incentive in the show
Right.
too. But yeah, I'm glad they got to be in there. I just think it's really well done, and you get to see them take a group photo together, so that's awesome. Um, so there was that, just your usual premiere. Um, I found it interesting. A lot of the Ahsoka cast was there as well, and Cal Kestis. That
Dominic,
his
not Dom, Cam Monahan,
Kid
not
Monahan.
not Beaumont Kin, but Cal
Yeah.
Kestis.
Cal Kestis was there as well,
Yeah.
posing with the Ahsoka cast. Um, I don't
All
know if
right.
that means anything, but it's like, hey,
No.
that's cool. Jedi Fallen Order Ahsoka connections. They got the actress who plays Sabine and Shin
Mhm.
there, and the actress who plays Morgan Elsbeth was there as well.
Mhm.
Did you see the when all the other Star Wars big name YouTubers were with Leslie Headland and Dave Filoni showed up, and you get the big picture of them and
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah.
Uh, but Dave's got a little Ahsoka jacket on. I wonder if he's trying to tell us something. Um,
Well, just a reminder. I mean, the season 2 is coming.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and who knows? It might be work. Who knows? It might be filming this year for all we know. Something's going on. Maybe I hope. But
Mhm.
yeah, that was cool. See Headland and Filoni there along with
Mhm.
together. That's really cool as well. I mean, I'm sure they worked together. He's the COO. He kind of got his hand in all the pies,
Yeah.
along with Kathleen Kennedy, of course.
I think
Uh,
he just showed up though. I think like that
oh
meeting
yeah,
was
to that
really
event.
fun. But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, no, I thought that was really really cool. I think it was
Mhm.
just a nice premiere.
Mhm.
Again, we'll see what actual show is like. How good the show is, and maybe incentivizing newcomers to check out a High Republic book. But hey, I'm glad they got invited. They deserve it.
Mhm. And you're talking about how mentioning the notes here, reviewers, the reviews are out, like you're saying. It's thankfully spoiler free. You something about it being the most accessible Star Wars in a long time. Do you want to elaborate more on
Yeah,
that?
I found that interesting, 'cause I think in some ways they might be right, because and I say accessible. I think the last kind of big accessible Star Wars show probably was the Mandalorian season 1.
Mhm.
Although they thought maybe, although I've seen simply since A New Hope, it's like I wouldn't go that far. But in terms of like, I kind of view it like, Mandalorian, new character, like kind of new era. No, that doesn't really matter that much. New storyline to kind of really that first season's really
Mhm.
just new focus on these new people. Compare that to say Book of Boba Fett, which is obviously about Boba Fett. Hope you like Boba Fett if you're watching that show.
Wait, that was
Kenobi,
about Boba Fett?
I
What?
know. Kenobi's like, well, hope you like Kenobi from the prequels if you're watching that show.
Yeah.
Um, Andor probably is also very accessible, but also I wouldn't start anybody with. Well, well, you probably could start with somebody with Andor because I feel like that show just really
Sorry.
works on
Just
that
trying to
level.
figure out how to organize this mic. I know Dom does something like this, but
Okay.
sorry, keep
No,
going.
that's fine. But it's definitely a very maybe not as widely general audience friendly show.
Mhm.
And then obviously Ahsoka is subconsciously part 20 of this epic Filoni saga he's been working on since Clone Wars.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess maybe Skeleton Crew is going to be its own thing, so maybe that will be it. But yeah, I think Acolyte probably is new characters era. It's not going to be really tied down by anything really. Um,
Right.
it's going to be about it's a kind of a new storyline. You probably don't need to know much about anything about Star Wars in order to watch it. And I think it's also very much going to be like Mandalorian, like Force Awakens, a jumping on point for a lot of new
Mhm.
people to
Yeah.
watch Star Wars and get into it. And I very much see this just in terms of marketing and the way possibly going to get more seasons, uh, as very much future of the franchise material in terms of just like a little one-off or Andor's 2 prestige seasons and then we're out. It's very much
Mhm.
long-term goals here. So yeah, that's kind of what I get at.
It really seems, and we say this about every show. It really seems like, well, we say this is the goal of every show. It's that it's going to. It seems set to nail that balance between new fans and yeah, and well worn on screen fans, and now Leslie's raising the bar even more with the paper fans. That's gonna be hard to navigate all three of those. Not of course, all the paper fans are also screen fans. That goes without saying. But yeah,
I don't. I mean, maybe someone out there is, but maybe somebody.
maybe like the anti-sequelists were all, I don't know, whatever.
All right.
But no, by and large, right. But anyway, my point being, yeah, like it seems poised because it's a space wizard show.
That too.
All the
That's a big
space
one.
wizards going around. If you think Star Wars, you think
You think Jedi?
yeah, genuinely speaking, you think these space monks in brown robes going war with their laser stick,
Mhm.
I mean, I think if my niece thinks of Star Wars, probably that. I don't know, but that's because she's seen Young Jedi Adventures and she loved it. That's another story. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and so yeah, it seems set to do that while also telling this a fairly familiar genre, this murder mystery
Mhm.
involving religious institutions that people have different conflicting feelings about, and I'm going to get to that next week. I was thinking about that already. As always, I'm always thinking about that one. And then yeah, it's going to be, but also I think it's also set to really reward those of us who've read High Republic and have read all the different Master and Apprentice and all these other stories, Bloodline or whoever, whatever that's set later in the canon, Shadow of the Sith. Not so much intentionally, but Claudia, High Republic. She's thought a lot about the Jedi too, and hopefully she has some involvement in the show, or at least Leslie's read High Republic and other. I don't know how much she's read, but again, my sense is there's a reflection on even her more controversial comments, again, which I'll get to next week, are a reflection on and a contribution to the discourse around the Jedi, and that
I think
requires
everybody's been like that, though. To be fair, even
sure.
Ryan is
Oh
probably.
yeah, absolutely, Ryan Johnson. My goodness,
Mhm.
I'm just saying, this. Well, that's just it. Is
Mhm.
this has the potential to succeed in reflecting on the legacy of the Jedi and the identity of the Jedi, the way Ryan did, right? In reflecting on what George laid down, the way Filoni succeeded, so has succeeded so well across, especially Clone Wars and Ahsoka, but also Rebels. Yeah, I mean, again, high bar. That's why we're going to spend so much time with it. Because I mean, whether or not whether they love it or whether they think no, she missed the boat here, she's making an argument, she's making a point, and explicitly wading into the waters, and she has in the promotional things. Again, is that just to drum up buzz so we talk about it? Get me thinking. Of course, that's kind of what I thought. But yeah, yeah, so a week and a day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to turn this into next week's discussion.
Yeah,
I'm kind of already thinking like, how much will I, as a High Republic, or maybe you as a High Republic fan, probably more so, you probably recognize it more than me, will get out of this show in terms of like, oh, like I feel like I have been rewarded for reading this book because of this one line in the scene.
Sure.
But yeah, that's fine. It's just like I'm just very curious of like how much is that balance, or it's like the end of the day, this is made for the general audiences.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that next week.
Sure. And last comment though to respond to that, it might not even be intentional on her part or on the creative part. I mean, the medium is the message, the content is the audience, and we all bring to everything we consume and everything we read and everything we do our own experiences. Again, that's with the religious institutions rebelling against religion. That's a huge piece and a huge example, and probably one of the biggest examples of us bringing stuff from our real world, our real lives. Those of us who are more invested, of course, in those questions. But yeah, so
and I'll end with this point.
Yeah,
Tony Gilroy researched what the Gamorrean massacre was to study up on when writing Andor for Mon Mothma's story. So, actually, an actual Star Wars fan about the timeline. So, if Tony Gilroy, who is an advent, not a Star Wars nerd, did his homework, Leslie Headland doesn't have any. Leslie Headland, you don't have any excuse. You are a Star Wars nerd. You should be doing the homework. So, if Tony Gilroy's doing, I'm sure he did. I'm 100% confident she did. But Tony Gilroy did his homework. So.
That's my point. Is she did her homework precisely because she's putting her skin in the game,
right?
Making a statement. Well, like, and so is Tony Gilroy, but the way Ryan Johnson really put his skin in the game, as a fan, making a statement about this text. So, yeah. All right. I think we've covered that enough. Again, next week. Sorry, not next week. Next week we're going to do a whole dang episode on just what we're looking forward to, and then. The week after, episode 1. Looking back on episode 1, or episode 1 and 2, I should say, of the Acolyte. That probably is going to be the whole episode. Just not worry about a second topic. That one.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the idea, it is spend more time eyes on screen and do more abbreviated main topic. That the Acolyte episode is going to be a co-main topic. And we do things differently here. The flagship, they tend to they kind of. I think go beat by beat, but go kind of scene by scene or kind of sequence. But you know what I mean, like kind of through the plot. Yeah. We might just say, hey, well, this character's in this moment in this whole beat, this whole idea. Kind of the way we do Tractor Beam. I think is. I'm just saying this now. Is just kind of the way we function.
Unless there was like one scene we particularly need to talk about or something.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Then we'll just go straight to the jugular.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
So that's the thing is the Underworld Network. If we're doing a similar thing, we like to make sure we're complementing. So, and we will. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty confident. We'll have some good things to say. I know the folks on the flagship will have some good things to say and across the network as well. So keep it locked. You're home for High Republic, but throughout the network, we're gonna all eyes on screen on the Acolyte. But anyway, speaking of eyes on canon as a whole, Joel, what do we think? Disney Canon at 10?
Yeah, 10 years old. It's
coming up to 10 years old.
It's middle school, man. Yeah. So yeah. So I didn't want to. So with this discussion, I I don't really want to do like our favorite things and our least favorite things, and kind of regurgitating our views on the individual pieces
Mhm.
entries. I mean, if that happens, that's just part of the natural discussion. I just kind of wanted to look at this kind of like as a big, broad kind of overview and look at like the themes and like kind of what how we're sort of the connective parallels and tissues of all of this of the 10 years of new canon when it came to this discussion in terms of
Mhm.
that's how I wanted to really focus on. So it's gonna be a little bit kind of esoterical, but we're gonna try to make do as we
Esoteric is what we do.
it is what we do here.
We love it.
Um, I think the first kind of big thing to talk about is obviously the beginning.
Mhm.
No, not episode 1. We talked about that last week. Yeah, see what I did there.
Yeah.
Do you remember if Phantom Menace was gonna be called the beginning?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, sure. Anyway.
uh, and as I put here in the notes, the reboot phase,
Mhm.
kind of the big kind of holy moly, Star Wars is changing forever. Obviously, Lucas sold it. You
Mhm.
know, so I think we had kind of a transition and kind of we're still seeing a little bit of the aftermath of those effects of, people dealing with that transition in their own way. You have
Yeah.
people dealing with the fact George is no longer in charge, and you have people dealing with that in the positive and negative because everyone has their own feelings on that. And then the second big one was obviously the loss, the reboot of the old expanded universe,
Mhm.
and kind of the different reactions to that. Um, and people kind of we kind of saw the formations already. I mean, everyone kind of had their reaction, and I feel like you kind of with the EU thing, you kind of had like maybe 2 or 3 different distinct camps of Camp 1, people just went along with it. Camp 2, kind of people who gave it a shot, realized it wasn't for them, and just decided to stick with the EU stuff and, kind of
Mhm.
just live through that, which, hey, that's you're doing it nicely, then, that's your
Sure.
life. And then obviously, the extremist radicals of hashtag bring back legends, which have died down a lot in the last 10 years. I feel like people are kind of giving up on that. We still see it every now and then, but,
Mhm.
at this point, it's nobody really, that's really not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and then, kind of same with George. It's, other people are glad he sold it. Then you get the people who are like, no, he's George Lucas's Star Wars is the only Star Wars for me. And then obviously, people who go along, went along with it and doing just fine. Um, I guess I got to ask you this kind of
Mhm.
retrospect, like, where were you when all this was kind of down in terms of your relationship with Star Wars in 2011, 2012 to that 2012, and kind of when
2012.
all this was going down? Because I know I was a lot deeper probably
Yes.
into it than you were at the time. Not super deep as I am now,
Sure.
obviously, but I certainly knew what the EU was. I had the original Thrawn trilogy. I think I had to play,
Oh.
or maybe not. I think I got that later.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, oh, and obviously, yeah, the Force kind of big transition, the end of the Clone Wars, and people kind of
Mhm.
dealing with that. Um, because that definitely ended. So, like, I guess where were you in all this? Where were you, Matthew, when all this was going down?
So I knew about these legend stories, sort of. But honestly, I was live long and prosper. Seth versus Stun. Set. Warp 7 engage. And then
So you,
lamenting. Oddly enough, I mean that was this interesting moment. So I was at Fan Expo, and I was also like, I mean, here's the thing: I waved this prequels flag. I've mentioned this before on this thing. I was all, you did George Lucas ruin my childhood? Jar Jar stinks, all that nonsense. So it was all, Clone Wars animated show. It's just a kids show, whatever. Not having watched it, clearly. I was still very much a Trekker and lamenting
you were dealing
the
with the fact that JJ was creating a multiverse.
yeah, and also just those were okay. Those took time for me to get into those, but lamenting uh lamenting the decline of Star Trek. And so I had this amazing moment, and this is to me moving forward to maybe 2015.
Mhm.
So I guess I have a different very different relationship to the EU than most folks, I think, in the Star Wars book space. In that I read Truce at Bakura in high
Well, not just
school.
the EU, it's just like Clone Wars too, which wasn't.
Yeah, in Star Wars generally. I was kind of outside of it a little bit. I read Truce at Bakura in high school because like, well, that's the first book after Return of the Jedi, so I'm going to read that. Logical, makes sense. Then I read the first book of what was it, the Legacy, not Legacy, the whole Honkin' 20 book series, whatever it's called.
New Jedi Order?
That one. The one where they drop a moon on Chewie. And then okay, what's going on there? But anyways, I just hadn't gotten really into it. And so I had two moments related to Fan Expo Canada and Toronto Comic Con. Yeah, it was Toronto Comic Con, or it might have been Fan Expo again. So 2014. 2013, 2014, they did the full, Lucasfilm did the full display.
Right.
The Ezra figure and the Kanan figure, like life size, I think, kind of mannequins. And I'm like, another Star Wars animated show. What are these kids? Yeah, what's going on here? Not interested. They're just pandering to kids. I'm eating my words. Don't worry, folks. And just not interested. And still chugging along with watching Next Generation. Enterprise was it ended the way it ended, but things were kind of what's happening. Battlestar Galactica, all these other in the sci-fi soup. I'll say that. And I was still, if I was going to hang my hat on anything, it would be a Trekker. Still, okay. Fast forward.
Trek was kind of having that bit of a bubble with the Abrams first film, but then kind of never went anywhere.
Yeah, all that. I think fast forward to, would it be in Fan Expo 2015? Or the Toronto Comic Con 2015? Yeah, I think it was that. Toronto Comic Con 2015. And I go there, and I'm looking for the Trek stuff. There's just nothing. There's just nowhere. It's just not relevant in the zeitgeist. That's changed now. Discovery Series finale is coming up, and that I'm excited for. But it just wasn't there. I was like, oh, I'm lamenting that. What's happening? And just I go home. I was like, okay, that's great. My beloved franchise, childhood franchise, just it's petering out. Unlike what we all thought would happen, and we thought it would just go on forever. Fast forward to the summer, CouchCon 2015, Anaheim, and they throw up everything on YouTube, and they suck me in hook, line, and sinker. And I'm fun employed at that time. I'm free to just literally just plant myself in front of the couch for 4 days, time my life according to the panel when the panels are going live on YouTube, or find them, scroll back to a live stream. And man, just everything that comes out and just everything that they show us. It was a really unprecedented moment in the history of conventions. One that, in COVID, they should have probably brought back more of. And one that I think I'm probably not alone in saying, okay, I'm really invested in this now. They've really shown me a lot and gotten me hyped and done an amazing job with what Celebration is for, is the hype. And especially with the YouTube, $0 I'm paying for whatever internet, but $0 on YouTube.
Yay.
And getting to experience of a con.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, then the moment. Would have been 2015. I mean, that's the thing. I had already started collecting Skywalker Strikes, so I'd already been like,
is there a Force Awakens trailer during that convention?
Definitely Force Awakens trailer, all that.
Yeah.
Now I guess back up. I'd already, so late, 2013, 2014, there was kind of a halting, somewhat of an attempt to what they ended up doing with Skywalker Strikes, was to start at New Hope, tell kind of the contemporary comic style. So I got a few of those books. I started reading them. It was pretty interesting. Like, okay, January 2015, might as well open a pull list and say, you know, Cyber City Comics, just on the north edge of Toronto here, and open a pull list and start collecting Star Wars #1, Vader #1, the Leia short run. I think I don't know if there was well, the Han short run was a little later after that.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, and then and then I go, you know, in I guess September, October, whenever the Aftermath trilogy comes out, or the first Aftermath comes out, and I get that on Kindle, and I read that, and I get through it. It was fine. But yeah, at that, so 2015 was.
Oh, I remember that.
So yeah, it was a bit of a delay.
Mhm.
I had paid attention to what was happening a little bit. I had read Darth Plagueis.
Okay. So I guess
no, had I read Darth Plagueis yet? It's a good question. I can't quite remember. I think I just read Darth Plagueis and kind of getting hooked on that too. So that's also part of my prequels conversion. So it's kind of connected to all this story, but all this kind of return to Star Wars that happens around this time. Yeah.
Well, in some way, like you're kind of proof then that what they did worked.
Yeah.
You know, because in a lot of you didn't go through that sort of transition period. I mean, I was not like I watched it. I was an observer. I wasn't really like I didn't have a side to quite frank, but like I know people who did have a side, and it's like this EU thing I invested a lot of my time with is over. There was sort of a sense for some people like maybe the Star Wars I'm into is gone. And obviously, ask Dominic, maybe not Dominic, ask Ben Hart. Hi Ben, if you're listening. He was very much. I mean, I've talked to him about this. And he's admitted it. He very much in the kind of the a little bitter that they canceled Clone Wars so prematurely and fell into that trap a little bit of like Rebels is taking the Clone Wars. He got over it obviously. He's fine. He's fine. He likes Rebels. He likes Rebels. It's fine. But people were like that. I know. I knew a lot of people who were very much like that was Rebels kind of was the thing that kind of had the thing of like it took away Clone Wars. Clearly there are a lot of people now who gotten over that, and I know
Rebels earned its way.
Earned its way, and people have gone back to Rebels and kind of like, oh wow, this show's actually like really really good, and like it's a really cohesive story. But that there was that kind of smoky transition in fandom of like George is gone, Clone Wars is over, the EU is no more, and sorry, I'm burping here. And it's kind of like how do we move forward? And obviously you're kind of you kind of are really the example of I guess what they did in the long run work because it brought in a bunch of new people. Small tangent, but I remember Star Trek fandom at the time. Again, I was because I remember really it was the Abrams films that era. Like when did the Abrams 07 or was it 08?
2009.
09, that's right.
Like I call it Abrams 09.
Abrams 09 was like I remember Star Trek just being everywhere. I remember it's like they're showing on TV. They put all the stuff on Netflix. I remember watching a bunch of the movies. So like that's like that brief period just before Into Darkness where it kind of then filtered off again. Like there was like brief period where like people I remember Mr. Sunday Movies kind of saying like there was a brief period where like Star Trek was cooler than Star Wars for like a few years
for 5 minutes.
Kind of, at least for that first movie before the second one came out. Obviously that's definitely changed with the new shows
because Marvel's the coolest now. So
but I mean just in terms of Star Trek having things to talk about and discuss with like although Star Trek's kind of going through its own divide right now of like you're either a fan all the way up to Nemesis or you aren't. There's that generational divide right now, but this isn't the Star Trek podcast, so I can't do my sociology on Star Trek fandom right now.
One thing I will say, just to add, another thing that hooked me in was was the promise of a coherent canon, which I'm laughing at now. But there was the whole thing that we're sold on of that these books and the novels and comics and everything on screen would interact with each other.
Well, I mean, that is, I think,
there's an appeal to it. That's the thing. There's this neat
oh,
appeal
yeah.
to me being a completist, wanting to dive in to the depth of things. And I mean, that's the thing with why it's so notable that there are all these authors at the Acolyte premiere, because that hasn't been really the case. And I've gone through this whole podcast over the last 2.5 years trying to figure, kind of feel my way through that, but especially the first few months. But yeah, that was definitely a big draw for me to get into the novels and comics and say, oh yeah.
Yes.
And that was part
Yeah.
of marketing for it too. So
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's always been. I don't want to compare these two much to Star Trek. Just
Yeah.
what happened we talk about. Like, that's always been like Star Trek is very clear of like, it doesn't care what the books has to say. Picard does not adhere to whatever the books have said post Nemesis. I mean, that is the paradox of Star Wars canon right now. We'll go back to kind of charting our course in a bit, but like, it is the most cohesive it's ever been. But I also think what fans wanted from it maybe wasn't the case. And I think maybe that's a situation of expectation versus, I don't know, reality. I mean, I think this is how I always like to put it when people said they wanted a cohesive canon. I think what they thought, like, we would have things like, Gallius Rex was Snoke. I think they want stuff like that. And Gallius Rex was not Snoke.
Or Thrawn in the sequel trilogy or something.
No, not that.
Okay. Because he gets a mention in the Aftermath trilogy, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, people did run Thrawn in the trilogy. I remember a whole thing where I had to convince myself that Thrawn probably wasn't going to show up in Episode 7. Although I had like this weird, like, kind of weird moment where, like, when I found out revealed that Kylo Ren was Han Solo's son, I was like, oh yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Because I remember reading the books back then, but it's like, oh wait, I was young and I still didn't understand continuity at the time. But I think what they meant by that is like, we read the books to get a really good hint of what's to come in the movies, and that didn't really happen. I mean, Aftermath kind of hints at Palpatine coming back, but that's more of an accident than than an actual. Like Resistance Reborn doesn't really match up with Episode 9. I think it's another big one. Or I'm trying to think of like other examples that people thought this would mean something for the films and then didn't. But
well, all the Snoke theories. All the Snoke theories.
All the Snoke theories, definitely. all the Snoke theories. But but at the same time though, it's like, it is a cohesive canon, though, right? It's like, you're not reading the Thrawn trilogy and they're not talking about a different type of Clone Wars, High Republic stuff. Maybe there aren't any original trilogy era on-screen stories, but they're still talking. That Vader moment, still one of the best moments in the early years of canon for sure.
I mean, I think what we had hoped is, speaking of JJ, we wouldn't get a moment like the Sorg would be able to tell him, when Wedge is flying in, maybe not have it right after Snap dies. I keep bringing that one up because that one, but it doesn't technically break anything. But we were hoping that, hey, maybe what we were hoping for was that Wedge would express his connection to his adopted son, and whatnot, and and say, oh yeah, if you want to know what that's all about, read these Aftermath books. And we
those
little
hints and stuff like that. Although if Vanessa Rose says, yes, I fought in the Nile Wars, I doubt she'll say that exactly like that, but you know what I mean, right? Then that's a bit more of like incentive, right? That's sort of that more connective incentive.
My point is, that's going to be the exception now, which again, I'm fine with. That I get that now. I can live with it, and especially the way they've made it so coherent is by making sure that things stay in their lane, right?
Although we got stuff like Cobb Vance showing up in
so but those are exceptions, and the actual stories don't fully perfectly line up, which is fine. I'm just saying, by and large, they don't have people that they make sure that the paper stories are more contained. The thing that Claudia Gray was talking
Right.
about at our panel in Toronto Comic Con,
Mm-hmm.
kind of saying, okay, tell a story that's important enough to justify the actual book, but make sure it's not so expensive and so affects things that screen folks will want to do. And they've really, the best stories really nailed that balance well, and most of them I think have.
Oh
But
yeah,
it's a challenge, right?
it's a challenge for certain.
Here's another example. Like let's see Mr. Bones. but here's another thing though. Here's another nice thing though, is that within paper there is the connection, right? Mr. Bones does show up in the Charles Soule comic, Poe Dameron comic, and that's a beautiful moment, and because paper to paper, it's more free to do that, and Charles probably wanted to do that, or Story Group gave him a note saying, "Yeah, you should do this. We recommend to do this." Where they can't do that to JJ. So
yeah, that's actually Mr. Bones is a good point because like we never see him with Snap. Obviously, I think Force Awakens had a bit of excuse because I don't think that was created, but like 8, 9, no, Mr. Bones. Shows up in a Lego special though.
Well, the Lego special, so the Tales of Invaders Castle one.
That's right, that too.
That's a very much a paper infused story, but
yeah, and I do think we talked about this. I think certain creatives will be more willing to be paper infusing, and others won't. But where was I? Oh yeah, but kind of to go back to the course of the ship here. Phase 1. I call phase this. I call it phase 1. Marvel lingo, because why not?
Yeah,
2013.
Republic lingo. Come on.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
Well, they stole it from Marvel first.
Sure.
2013 to 2019. I hope my microphone's okay.
You're good.
Okay, good. What was I gonna say? Yeah. So 2013, 2019. Obviously, I think that era of canon was very much affected by the sequels, coming out, and kind of the center of a lot of Star Wars gravity. People always say with original trilogy focused, but I actually disagree in that it's not so much original trilogy focused. I think the center of gravity around the storytelling a lot at the time was very A New Hope centric. I feel like that very much was like the gravity, the center of Star Wars of that time, because everything kind of either was meant to like bleed into A New Hope or kind of spun off from A New Hope. The Rogue One, obviously, that's a great example, the biggest example right there. That's basically a few days before A New Hope. Solo. Obviously, it probably would have wanted to spin out to its own little mini series, but as its own, it's kind of very much a here's Solo's origin story, and then go see A New Hope after that. Obviously, he still had many years to go, but they didn't fill it out. Rebels, obviously, I think was meant to be more bleeding into A New Hope.
Yeah.
There's kind of the conspiracy theory among fans of they were probably meant to be the rebels that stole the Death Star plans before that changed. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know. There's some evidence for it. There definitely seems like something was meant for, and obviously they didn't really go that route with Rebels by the end. And then, kind of all 3 sequels are kind of spiritual. Maybe like the last one are more spiritual successors of A New Hope. Not just in terms of like the Redux thing, but just kind of like in terms of the lessons and kind of the themes that are pulling from there. But even the comics and books. Well, maybe not the comics and books so much, but like, Skywalker Strikes is very much after A New Hope. The only one that really kind of is more of a successor to Return of the Jedi is Aftermath 1, at the time as well. And one of the things kind of also is you can very much tell things were very limited because of the films being made. And that was kind of the cool thing though about after you kind of could tell after every movie came out, like more and more you almost can feel like this has been unlocked. It's not like a video game. Like you have now unlocked this stuff.
Yeah.
You've now unlocked this stuff.
The thing we criticized EA for.
I know. I know. It's like I'm sort of like I still love Bloodline. That's still one of my favorite Claudia Gray novels. But
Mm,
I kind of my love of it is now more in line of like I think it's a really good Leia character study.
mhm.
Not so much in terms of like a sequel era world building study.
Yeah, we
Um,
were saying last week. Yeah.
yeah. So there's that.
Mhm.
Um, but that those were sort of the thematic cornerstones I feel of very much of phase one and
Yeah.
obviously and even down to the movies themselves having almost like a hierarchy of the saga and then these two films kind of to support the saga in some sense. Um, but I'll toss it to you, Mess. You did if kind of thinking about it now, kind of 10
Mhm.
years on this sort of phase when the Skywalker saga, did you notice any have you noticed any like cohesive themes, like kind of overarching messages, sort of like not in terms like a kind of a big picture kind of a
Yeah.
thing?
Well, I mean, if anything, like we're getting at like their focus and emphasis,
Mhm.
they kind of trends is maybe a way of putting it. Yeah, I definitely see. I mean, certainly, with Rebels and Rogue One, I mean
Mhm.
that's very clear, moving towards A New Hope.
Mhm.
They were intentional that Skywalker strikes, Darth Vader. Uh,
Mhm.
that even was it Heir to the Jedi? I think the book
Oh
that I
yeah,
have, but I haven't read.
good
Um,
about that.
that building things immediately after. Again, I gotta say, The Force Awakens, yeah, it had some things new, but it was pretty intentional, pretty clear references. And that's still my iffy thing about it. It's still so darn close to A New Hope that it just I get why it was, but it dampens my enthusiasm for it. If they even have an X-wing going through a trench run trying to build a destroy super laser, uh, you know that kind of, and so all of that says to me, I mean, again, the reason Force Awakens is so darn similar is because they're trying to reboot. And by rebooting, you go back to the thing everyone universally points to as the origin. Not reboot in terms of the story, but reboot in terms of this fandom and then this its prominence in the culture. And of course,
Mhm.
the safest bet, the surest bet, is A New Hope. Is telling the stories around it. Even the Legends comic that I mentioned, it's set right after A New Hope. It's just that they just reset the canon to these other things. Um, so that's for sure. I think one thing I'd say about the comics, I do think there was always some semblance of a plan to get where we are now, and obviously they didn't plan it out. I don't think they planned it at this 10-year block.
Charles Soule knew from day one in 2013 he had the Kira arc all planned out.
Yes,
He saw the future.
yes.
I'm
Because
kidding.
he saw Kira in Solo,
Oh, no,
well
I see
before
the
Solo had come out.
exactly.
Was the Game of Thrones still on? Anyway, because he was watching Game of Thrones. He was like, oh, this Daenerys character. Anyway,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But
but
yeah, I
yeah,
know
I
what you
mean,
mean.
but even like in the way you have this broken up, right?
Hmm.
To 2019, the comics to 2019 are just before Empire Strikes Back, and so filling in that story in between. I will say there are there were two other trends here that don't quite fit with that mold. One very clearly doesn't, in that is the whole aftermath interconnected story, and that really was an interconnected story. You have the aftermath trilogy, you have the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, and you have the Shattered Empire comic, and Battlefront 2 story. That
Oh yeah, that
definitely
came
part of
out.
that, and so that was definitely a great area of focus. That really rewarding. I haven't read the aftermath, the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, but
You should.
then later on, I mean, it came out later, but Squadrons going back into that time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've made this connection before. That was, I think, yeah, there was clearly some intention there. You want to talk about an interconnected canon telling us an interconnected story at the same time. There's the Naboo level in Battlefront
Hmm.
is you see it from a different point of view in the Shattered Empire comic. And so there's that Han Maz Kanata in Maz's castle, and then there's I don't know if there's an explicit connection to Life Debt there, but
Yeah, there's a mention of Gallius Rex in there.
Yeah,
No, and Han's looking for the Kashyyyk. So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So those kinds of things, and so that's just another big thing. So I mean, it's interesting to say, okay, so you got the New Hope fans and the Return of the Jedi fans are just wanting to know, okay, you can tell this new story. What happens next? Though that question, that of course Legends did do, like I mentioned, Truce at Bakura, but let's do something new here. Why not? Let's only have it go to the Battle of Jakku, and this 1 year difference, and then the Empire. There's the Galactic Concord, so that, and the Battle of Jakku is the end, which gets me to the other trend was the road to that kind of tie-in material, the road to the Force Awakens, the road to the Last Jedi. I don't think there was a road to the Rise of Skywalker, but
There was that was Resistance Reborn. And
Resistance Reborn, but that was it.
no, there were a few others in
There were
there.
a few others, yes. And that one, Resistance Reborn is more of a culmination of everything in paper until that point, more than anything to do with Rise of Skywalker, because you can't tell JG what to do. Well, fair enough. I'm not griping with that. I'm just saying there was no.
I don't even know if they had a script back then or when they were written.
That, I mean, that's, is it Resistance Reborn where Wedge formally adopts Temin, I think. So that's it. And so that whole thing, I mean, two of the greatest books in canon, both by Claudia Gray, Lost Stars and Leia Princess of Alderaan, are part of that road too, even though they're set much before. And that's an interesting thing. I'm just saying, let's fill out the backstory. Let's tell a story. That's also, again, part of the. It ends up being part of the aftermath.
Sorry
thing.
about that.
Mute your mic there. Thanks. Yeah. Bless you, Joel's dad.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. More part of the aftermath thing, but also, I mean, that great self-insert and welcoming in new fans, younger fans of who would be fans of the original trilogy, but drawing in. I mean, that's part of what's so successful about Lost Stars. It does that. So those trends, I think we've talked about this a few times. It's still Gen Xers, younger boomers and Gen Xers running the show. And so it still is this thing of the original trilogy, that is Star Wars. Even I'm, again, I'm undergoing my prequels conversion, and so are many others. And, that thing of prequelists having more say, that is further along. And so that's, yeah, I mean, it makes sense though. They go to the thing we all agree on, Hasbro with the Black Series, the thing we'd all probably shell it to buy, until the very end of Solo, a character I'm sure a lot of casual fans thought had died in the Phantom Menace shows up. So yeah, because that's another thing that happens over this time. Yeah, Rebels definitely I mean, has its flourishing, it has its run. Clone Wars on Netflix is another part of this. It's definitely part of my prequels conversion, and part of everyone's prequels conversion. This emerging sense of, and just being able to binge watch the show, that George was so ahead of his time in doing a show that actually works better if you can just sit down and watch all 4 episodes in one go. It's supposed to happen to wait 4 weeks. And it's funny that in it was in 2020, whatever, 2019, whatever it was, when Clone Wars season 7 came out, we actually still have to wait. Whenever that was, we still have to wait week by week. But then, Siege of Mandalore, we're watching that in one block. Come on, it's a film. So, yeah, I think that's also, if I'm tracking the rise of prequelism as a dominant force in Star Wars, which I can say that, as a decisive force, not a dominant, nothing's that dominant, but a more decisive force that is now.
Sorry about that.
It was emerging. There were things still definitely being stewed. It just was hard to see sometimes.
I mean, I think stupid neighbors outside honking their horn.
That's right.
I mean, I think it was the right move, honestly, for this kind of
Yeah,
reboot
it
because
was.
to start with A New Hope as well, it's the origin, which made came first in '77 people.
Yeah.
But because a lot of not just to reboot the EU and stuff, but just sort of like, okay, let's just strip down Star Wars,
Mhm.
forget all the lore and the storylines and all that. We can worry about that later, and just kind of get to brass tacks of like, what are the core themes of Star Wars here,
Mhm.
and then just tell a story around that. Um, and a lot of the jumping on points of Star Wars, I think, kind of strip Star Wars down to kind of its barest bones. I think Force Awakens does that. I think Mandalorian does that.
Yeah,
I think Acolyte kind of really does that. Could probably maybe do that too, and that's why again they're the
it might. Yeah.
accessible ones. I think Andor also does that, but that's just but because it's more of adult oriented, it's kind of hard to get like a general
Mhm.
audience into it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's sort of like forget all these lore gobbledygook stuff. Just like what's Star Wars? What's brass tacks?
And
What are the
what do people think of Star Wars? And most people at the time, most Gen Xers would think it's Luke hopping in the cockpit destroying the Death Star.
I mean, I wouldn't just say Gen Xers. I just think general audiences in
Yeah,
general.
general audience. Yeah, people in
I think
general, even younger.
2015, like
Yeah,
probably knew who Darth Vader was. I don't know if they would know who Qui-Gon is. Probably now that answer is a little different.
yeah.
But
Well, again, that's my
certainly,
point. Is that was a ways away, a few years away.
certainly.
So it was a smart. It was the right business move for sure, and
I
probably the
just
right
think,
storytelling move. But yeah.
yeah, probably too. I don't think it's kind of also kind of something we talk about when we come to like High Republic.
Mhm.
Um, but I just don't think we see it kind of just bridging backwards, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, let's start more in like a more contained area of like just focus on building up what the empire's like, focus on uh kind of focus just kind of on this like small area.
Mhm.
And then as over time, kind of then more build bridge out backward instead of just 5,000 years in the past and
Yeah.
post Endor just full steam ahead for 20 years. Um so you kind of can kind of gradually um grow from there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to your
Mm,
other points because I remember you saying some stuff and I forgot what you said.
That's
So
okay. I mean, I think one last thing I'll say though is again about the business model. There are folks who just didn't even read the EU at all,
that
that
too.
love the films, or hadn't read the EU, like were already in their 30s or whatever, and maybe read these novels when they were teenagers. Yeah, again. Part of going with the New Hope, going with the original trilogy focus is to bring them in, get them on board with this new canon, this new changeover. Yeah. So again, it definitely the business decision, and not harping on it. I'm saying it was the only logical choice. Um, then one last thing I'll say about that is, again, the whole JJ, nobody can tell JJ what to do. When George Jackson Miller, this is a bit of a tangent, but uh, for some reason, I didn't quite grasp until John Jackson Miller said it at New York Comic Con last year. And I've said this on this podcast before. Yeah, the main reason they reset the canon is so JJ could do whatever he wants with Luke, Han, and Leia. And I mean, this speaks to bringing the original trilogy fans, who are the main characters of Star Wars. You'll still ask most folks, they'd say Luke, Han, and Leia. And so you can't have Chewie dead. You can't have I don't know, what can't you have?
You
I
have
don't,
Han having two children.
can't
Force
have John
Awakens.
having two children and being a stay-at-home, or you can if JJ wanted to do that, but he wanted to do something else, so he had to be free to do that. Right?
I mean, would anybody want to do that really? Do you know any creative who would want to add? Well, maybe I'm sure there's somebody out there who
Well,
would
that's
want
my
to
point.
here to
Yeah,
change. And
like
George Lucas wasn't going to do that. He was just going to go full steam ahead.
that's my point. Is whatever the had been established in the EU, JJ wouldn't want to be bound by that, right? And so
Nobody would. Though.
no, nobody would, and so
Let's not act like
if
George Lucas was going to do that too.
if it turns out in the EU Han had kind of given up on the marriage and was going back flying around the galaxy, Karting Rathtar's around, maybe JJ would have made him a nice stay-at-home family guy. Probably not, but you never know.
I mean, you know, like
That's just a wild random thought, but you never know.
all right. I mean, that's the reason why they did. Because no author was going to adhere to the EU, and George certainly wasn't. George probably would have not even bothered to reboot it, just like tell it. And it's like everyone else would have to figure out how to make that work.
George would have had some sort of Guardians of the Will, like the Wills themselves, reach out and just maximize their body. I don't know. I'm just
Probably
like the weird George stuff that George would do.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. So now I remember what I wanted to talk about too, because you brought this up during this little phase. The what we in the fandom call the Endor to Jakku multimedia project.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit of the journey too. I think what's really interesting, and it's something I've noticed a lot. You know, people say, "Oh, we're tired of the original trilogy. We're tired of the original trilogy in comics." Here's the thing with me. I'm not tired of the original trilogy era because I want to see it outside of comics. I want an original trilogy book. I want a video game set in the original. I'm going to get one with Outlaws. So, like, it's very interesting that only one medium right now has really covered the original trilogy era, and that is the comics. Much like how the Clone Wars era is really just 7 seasons of TV. Like there aren't a lot of books set in the Clone Wars. I mean, there are a few. I mean, I got Ride the Red Blade and Catalyst, but they're not that many. You know, with this what I call the Endor to Jakku era, you know, you have Empire, Shattered Empire, right? Yeah, Shattered Empire. You have the Aftermath trilogy, which kind of establishes the wider scope. Then you have the Alpha Squadron trilogy, which basically is in that exact same time period, but from a different perspective of people. You have, again, the Battlefront 2 campaign, which is, again, same thing, different perspective of people. And then you have Squadron, which is like in that general vicinity. Doesn't cover the entire period, but certainly is in that area because you've got Ray Sloan there. And it's just interesting that has sort of been the case with this, like 1 year of storytelling. The only thing it doesn't have is a movie or a TV show at this point. Got mentioned in Mandalorian, but like that one kind of that Aftermath era has
one shot in Return of the Jedi with the Coruscant statue going down.
I guess that's right. I guess that technically retroactively counts.
There you go.
And I just think that's sort of interesting that kind of has happened, and I'll be curious, like, if maybe like comics go back to that area, like, cause they can, like, you know, we don't really know what Luke and Leia are up to, so they can cover that specific story trend of that era.
Yeah.
Where, you know, like again, like I said before, like I do want OT era, and I mean OT era. I'm talking about in between A New Hope and Empire and Return of the Jedi. You know, it doesn't have to be about Luke and Leia. Just maybe make it about rebel soldiers again, like they did with Twilight Company, or I don't know, somebody who just exists in that era, or if, you know, the Outlaws video game is going to do that. So, I'll talk. We can talk about that first, and then we can get into the journey too.
Right. Well, and then we probably need to move on to the second half of this. But I mean, they'll be interesting. I mean, again, we're also talking about where they go back to in the future. Right. It'll be interesting. I think it'll be, you know, be interesting for them to go back to that year and see what Luke was up to. And I do wonder if it will be a comic book. I've wondered this for a while, in part because there's a moment in Charles's ongoing, where Luke and Lando are chatting and saying, talking about finding artifacts and things like that. And obviously, that's really just a nod to Rise of Skywalker and Shadow of the Sith. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that in a comic. Unless, I mean, Lucasfilm said, nope, we're saving that, we're saving that or something, or at least saving that for when they finally tell Luke's story in the Mandoverse or whatever. Then they'll be able to go back and fill that in. But yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't want that to be the ongoing run because, you know, and I've said this before, and I've said this on Track to Beat a lot, right? Like I've said, I mean, just like, well, by the same logic now. Phantom Menace 25 is a huge party. For the same logic that they went to A New Hope. in 2015.
Mm.
In 2025, they can go to the Phantom Menace and bring a huge heap ton, uh, bantaton of fans, of prequel fans to eat up this comic. The ongoing adventures of Obi-Wan and Anakin or something.
Yeah, but I don't know. But, well, we've gotten this before, so I
Yeah,
want to just
got this comic.
and then as for the Journey 2, Journey 2 is a
Yeah.
very interesting little thing
Yeah.
because I do think that's where some of the disappointment of a quote unquote cohesive canon
Yeah,
was.
I agree.
I mean, quite frankly, I think Last Jedi had the best Journey 2.
Mhm.
But it's like I remember Greg Rucka's Journey to Force Awakens before the Awakening.
Mhm.
And like Finn had a very different backstory to what eventually we got. Kind of like there is no indication Finn is an elite trooper in the First Order who kind of
Right.
defects at the end, or obviously Poe's backstory got changed by the end by Rise of Skywalker, and then they had to kind of
Mhm.
finagle that a bit. Um, and then stuff like Phasma, like I like the Phasma book, but it's like it doesn't really factor into her character in the movie.
Mhm.
So that's something about Journey 2, which just something I just sort of wanted to bring up. But
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I mean, again, well, what you were saying before, the black box, bloodline. Claudia, she couldn't fill things in that she probably wanted to, or would have maybe enhanced the world building aspect of the story, but they would have been spoilers for Force Awakens that we didn't really get
that
because
came
we
after
didn't
Force
play.
Awakens, though.
Or it would have been spoilers for the Last Jedi, maybe, I don't know, but
They didn't probably know what the world was still.
but also to say, yeah, I mean, Leia Prince of Alderaan is really fantastic, both because it tells a story of the burgeoning rebellion.
Mhm,
We hadn't gotten a Leia story like that yet. We'd get
mhm,
something sort of similar in Kenobi, but a few years earlier.
mhm,
Uh, but also really establishing, giving us Leia and Holdo's relationship and Emily's relationship, which we see, and Laura Dern, she doesn't play the character the way she's written in the novel because it just didn't play well on screen apparently. But um, yeah, it's it was really successful in giving that. So you got that moment. I mean, this is another thing you're already beginning to see in uh, in the relationship between paper and screen in this era. You is yeah you have that moment in the Last Jedi with Leia and Emmeline. Holdo's about to go Holdo maneuver,
mhm.
and Leia has this really intense moment. And Carrie's performance and Laura Dern's performance definitely bring everything to it, right?
Oh yeah.
But having that in mind that they're childhood friends, um, that that changes things a little bit. He doesn't necessarily, but it doesn't necessarily, but similar to the way I talk about like Vader versus Anakin, any kind of Vader versus Anakin moment, like in Kenobi. Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's why I think Last Jedi had the best one because they think they probably knew a bit more going in than they
yeah,
did with the other two.
probably true.
Because Force Awakens, and Rise of Skywalker, their scripts were constantly changing. So
Hmm.
whatever they had, probably given notes were probably changed dramatically. Although I've always said Catalyst is still the best example of tie-in media.
Hmm.
But I won't get into Rogue One there.
Yes,
Uh
it's coming up on 10 years since it's coming up on 10 years since A New Dawn came out.
we are old. We're getting older. I'm
Mhm.
scared.
Hey, I'm going to a celebration for my 40th birthday, guys. Come on.
I'm almost 30.
Yeah,
I haven't been invited to a party for a premiere.
figured.
Where's my
Oh,
premiere? Oh yeah. So phase two. Phase two. Dun 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 dun. Dun. I call this the expansion period, and I mean to be fair, I know I put like a very hard end date with a question mark. Um,
yeah,
but I definitely think starts in 2020 for sure because obviously the sequels
yeah,
are over. And then I call it the expansion era because I feel like this is where things really start to expand. I think we're finally opening up a lot more than we were in those years. We have the Mandalorian obviously kicking off the real meat and bones of the post Endor era. Um, High Republic starts in 2021.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, 2021. So our first real backwards, backwards, not super backwards, but still backwards enough
Mhm.
to the pre Phantom Menace era. Um, books and in the standalone books and comics, a little bit. Did Master and Apprentice come out pre
It's
2019?
2019,
Okay,
but
so yeah,
it looked ahead. It looked ahead.
definitely had a little bit more prequel era solo books. Books and comic kind of stayed the course. I feel in terms of like the solo stuff. Not Han
Mhm.
Solo. Um,
The standalone books.
standalone books and obviously comics are still very much in the original trilogy era of getting us to Return of the Jedi, getting
Mhm.
us there. Um, uh, let's see, I wrote down my notes, but yeah, that is very much, we got the Mandoverse, the Empire Strikes Back crossover, the big one. Um, and
Mhm.
I think things were not as they weren't as worried about tying into us to
Mhm.
the saga or being supplementary or subservient to it in a lot of way. Like, people say, the Mando versus episode 6.5, and they can say that all that they want. I mean, that's fine. But
Mhm.
I very much see Mando versus telling its own saga, the Mandoverse saga. Yes, obviously there's going to be connections because history has to play a role. But, at the same time, I think it wants to tell its own saga, a saga within a saga of the Mandoverse and his pals versus Thrawn in terms of the big storyline there.
Mhm.
Um, even High Republic, which is very much a prequel to prequel. I think it's also interested in telling its own saga. I think it's like here's the saga of the Nile versus the Jedi, and kind of it can stand on its own as one of the great tales of Star Wars.
Mhm.
And that's very much where I've seen this sort of phase two, for lack of a better term, go on.
Yeah.
But I'll toss it to you, Matthew. What are your thoughts on this sort of way of thinking?
I mean, to your point about the films
Hmm.
no longer being the center of the universe,
Or just the
the
saga, the Skywalker saga, one through
the
nine.
Skywalker saga, but
Mhm.
like these big film projects, right?
That too.
And how everything has to be the focus and the energy on that.
Mhm.
The training wheels were off. The leash was off. Uh, Books and comics can just and the different shows can run their course. I mean, there was another thing that happened called a global pandemic
That too.
that
That happened.
was really great timing. Not That's not the best way of putting it, but
Take
um,
that out of context, people.
it
Sorry.
was part of why for this period, and that's the thing.
Hmm.
I'll say for this phase that is going to change. But for this phase, this is the window where Star Wars was a streaming TV franchise for this period, this window. In
Hmm.
terms of the focus of Lucasfilm for new stories. And what that meant was Dave Filoni was able to finish his Clone Wars series, his magnum opus. He was able to help develop the Mandoverse, carry on the story about the Mandalorians. You get Katie Sackhoff give me a Mandalorian jetpack up on Canny Plateau. I'm right there immediately. And then you have Ahsoka. Well, first of all, everything with the dark saber and carrying that on, and then you have Ahsoka and Filoni really being able to cap off if he's capping off or just
Or
carry
like continue.
forward.
It probably
Yeah,
carry.
carry forward, but I think in live action, maybe I don't want to say fuller or deeper, but kind of reflecting back on both the events of Clone Wars and Rebels. You get that episode 5 of Ahsoka,
Hmm.
um, and you get that only, of course, after Clone Wars season 7,
Hmm.
only after Rebels. But you get everything in Ahsoka. You know, there are a few new characters, but it's
Hmm.
all. That's the funny thing. It's this weird thing where this new canon is so established that we have these beloved characters in new canon. We have Hera and Sabine and Ezra, and uh, again the Clone Wars on Netflix, and so the flourishing of Ahsoka. I mean, she was already probably pretty popular, but during that phase 1, she became one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars. Period. Uh, as the show was on Netflix, then on Disney Plus, and to see her continue that story doesn't need. I mean, Balin and Shin, really fascinating characters, and we'll see.
Rest in
Hopefully,
peace, Ray Stevenson.
yeah, hopefully what they're able to do with that.
Mhm.
And the blue guy, the blue guy really
Yeah.
making his mark. In Rebels, yes, but also then coming into live action. And on the page, that's also the most wonky. We've gone over this one to death. The most wonky.
That's more of a Tim Zahn problem than just
Yeah.
paper screen at this.
Paper screen.
Um,
So there's that. I will say, so the Filoni, we call it the Filoniverse. Filoni being able to carry his stories forward. Well, one thing to say with the training wheels being off, this is really where the paper and screen just stick with their own, go their own way a little bit, and it worked. It worked well. Like they kind of stayed in their own lane. You notice, I mean, there aren't any films, but you think there might have been. There was rumors of a Mandalorian adaptation or a novel adaptation. There was rumors of tie-in novels, tie-in stories. Have there been any tie-in stories to live action? Paper tie-in stories to live action stories.
I think the closest I heard was there was going to be like a little comic for Acolyte coming out, but that's about it.
I mean, I didn't even know that. I mean, that's going to be. I think that's going to be a whole new phase, and that might be a whole new thing. Again, that might be the exception in the paper screen relationship that we talked about at the top. But my point being, they just haven't bothered to make tie-ins, and you can hear Chris and I go off about the comic adaptations of these shows on Tractor Beam.
That's not a tie-in. I don't consider that a tie-in.
Those are copy and paste. Take a screenshot and print the screenshot. Draw the screenshot. Trace the screenshot. No, those aren't
tie-in. Catalyst is the tie-in.
Yes, absolutely. All the road twos in their own way are tie-ins.
Even Resistance Reborn, which is probably not much of a tie-in, but that's tie-in.
But my point then is they just haven't bothered because they're concerned with saying, okay, here's Beth Revis saying, yeah, I want to write the Han Leia wedding honeymoon story, right? Was it Beth Revis?
Well, that's a tie into something that's closed now.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Is the park tie-ins, and yes, there have been the park tie-ins,
which are actually some really good books, by the way. Don't let the fact that tying to
and that's another thing is
I love the Galaxy's Edge tie-in.
Yeah, the Galaxy's Edge comic by Ethan Sachs and Will Sliney. The Galaxy's Edge novel, which I'm only halfway through. I have to pause it. Yeah, that's the thing is, well, that's maybe another thing is that's another part of this phase is Galaxy's Edge and Galactic Star Cruiser. Speaking of which, I did sit down and watch the whole 4 hour. I didn't watch it in one go with Jenny Nicholson's 4 hour thing on the Galactic Star Cruiser debacle. I mean, so those tie-ins, but those are tie-ins to things that are kind of these. I mean, there isn't a fully fleshed out. There's a fully fleshed out story to Galactic Star Cruiser, but there isn't. For Galaxy's Edge, there isn't really much story there. So, Ethan Sachs, write these stories about Doc Ondar and finding this jewel and all that stuff. Why not? But by and large, they just haven't worried about that. Again, Mike Chen, he wants to write a story about the business on Caden Amoidia that does count. And again, Obi-Wan, and exploring Neimoidians as an Asian trope and all the other interesting things there. And then of course is the thing we're talking about. The most ambitious publishing initiative that Star Wars has ever done, period, is High Republic. And again, there's been so much of a push, so much focus on it, so much marketing focus. It had its own YouTube show for a while with Christina Ariel, and there's a reason why. That it's great to see. It deserved, and these authors, this Team Luminous, really deserved to have their time in the sun the last few days. 2 days ago.
Good for
and
them.
and you know, and so again, this is going to be, it's a question of this exception with Leslie Helen wanting to actually be bound to or inspired by these stories. We don't know,
Well,
but
mhm.
you know, so that, and then, you know, speaking of Charles Soule, and this is the last thing I want to say is, another highly ambitious thing that Star Wars comics had done, and the most ambitious thing that Star Wars comics had done, period, in its 50 something year history, is
I don't know about
all
that.
these all these crossover events. Saying again, you're going to tell these interconnected stories centered on Kira and her rise, her attempt to take over, or to take out the Sith, and how that goes, and you know, bring in this character here, and you know, involve her in. I mean, that's another trend, I think, going back even to Phase One. Just this is a bit of a tangent, but the paper first characters that, you know, you got Chelly, you have Santa. Oddly enough, around the Afroverse here, if I can call it that. Yeah, but the you know, these comic crossovers that did peter out a little bit. Unfortunately,
Went a little too long.
Went a little too long. I mean, I wonder if the characters needed the different books kind of had to go off and resolve on their own. Again, it was this question we kept asking: when are we getting to Return of the Jedi? When are we getting to Return of the Jedi? But the first two, I'd say the first two, War of the Bounty Hunters and what's oh goodness, Crimson Reign.
Crimson Reign.
Those two, not Hidden Empire. War of the Bounty Hunters and Crimson Reign, I think, will stand the test of time. I think as crossover events. You know, I mean, it's also kind of the Marvel thing to do, but in Star Wars, it means something more. It means it's pushing something towards the films, pushing something with these characters that we know and love already, including Chelly.
Expanding on a film that didn't get a sequel with Kira.
Yeah, expanding on the Solo, bringing that in, you know, and this character that, you know, fleshing that out, and so, yeah, it really, yeah, again, really ambitious. It's an era, so yeah, it's, you know, it's an era of letting paper do its thing, and one of the things it did by and large was interconnected stories, because all these writers really wanted to come together. Of course, screen also did that, right? These interconnected stories that are still going, like you said, until Mandalorian and Grogu, and then the, you know, the Heir to the Empire film. You know, and then the last point I wanted to make is this is the flourishing of prequels. Right? This is, you know, again, and that's why I put Master and Apprentice as part of this. I'd say it's part of this. Looks forward to time where people really want to get a Qui-Gon Obi-Wan story, right? People really want to see Claudia Gray write both an adult novel and a young adult novel at the same time in the same novel, and pull it off masterfully, and say, you know, again, reflect on the legacy of the Jedi based on what George had laid down in the prequel trilogy. You know, you get, yeah, I mean, Last Jedi came up before. You know, even you can almost say Last Jedi in this sense looks ahead, right? It looks
Probably,
ahead.
yeah.
It is the most
definitely.
prequel of the three. It's the most prequel list of the three sequel trilogy films. It's one of the most prequelist things in that first phase, if I can say that. Right? Just because, specifically because, and I think I realize this now, specifically because it reflects on the identity of the Jedi, and I think of the identity of the Jedi, as an order, as an institution, as a tradition, that we don't have enough in the original trilogy to go on, because we needed the prequel trilogy to actually reflect on that. And so The Last Jedi is able to do that. Of course, Master Apprentice then does that. Of course, then High Republic full bore. And now we're into, again, Phantom Menace 25 party. Yeah, I should mention the fact povs, but I mean, those came out because of the 40th anniversaries.
I do,
you know, nice kind of, again, paper doing their own thing, and those don't quite fit neatly with these phases, except to say, you know, there is some intertextuality, right? There's Master and Apprentice and Master and Apprentice. There's Brotherhood and Brotherhood.
Right.
There's sequel trilogy characters during the Steadfast Soldier sequel trilogy character Pride in the original trilogy era, also in the Greg Pak Vader comic. So
yeah,
so
you said,
I said a lot of things, but yeah,
you brought up something I think I kind of didn't mention. Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of things I didn't mention when we talked about that first page.
it's like we're two different
Um,
people.
I know. That that I think you call it that establishment of canon. And
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I think by the time after Rise of Skywalker, definitely, I think we at a place now where I feel like canon has its own identity now. Kind of has established
mm,
itself. Things like the First Order being the enemy after Return of the Jedi doesn't feel as like alien anymore. It's like, oh yeah, that's how
yeah.
it is. That I feel it's a natural thing. Sequel trilogy aliens and planets coming now retroactively back into prequel era stories and sequel eras and original trilogy era stories and
Mhm.
High Republic era stories. I don't know if Canto Bight ever shows up in the High Republic. Um, if it did, that was cool.
We
I
can
think
get them
Osni
into
Prime gets mentioned.
yeah.
So Osni Prime gets mentioned there.
Hosnian Prime shows up in the fight with them.
Um, and also, things like the animated shows actually are canonical. My
Yeah.
friend read within the chat, and for a long time, I think you remember, like I was a doubter for a long time of if the animated shows would even matter to the live action stuff. I was very much in doubt about that, especially when we were like speculating, like would Kenobi have a flashback of Ahsoka and stuff like that. Funny enough, it never did.
It
So
didn't need to, but
it didn't need to, but it's funny enough, it never did either. But it's like, you know, but it's sort of like I was like, I don't even think they'll even acknowledge. I think they'll act like if Ahsoka never existed because I think they don't care about the anime stuff.
I mean, you
And
don't
I'll
think Clone Wars existed.
yeah, I would feel like they would they would write the story very
Yeah,
much in a Clone Wars didn't happen, just the prequel live action films did.
right.
Um,
I mean,
uh,
yeah, I can
and
almost just say the 10 with the. I mean, it's a 501st from Revenge of the Sith,
mhm.
but we care about the clones because of the Clone Wars.
Well, I
So
can say but it also
that
we
movie.
have Maul and Solo, but the
Mhm.
Inquisitors. So
Yeah,
already there you go.
that's the big one.
There are the acknowledgement of the animated series. They are as canonical as everything else, and they do their contributions to world building
Mhm.
matter. And right, like Maul showing up. We can talk about the execution. We can talk about whether it was worse, kind of stopping the movie for and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But that acknowledgement right there is okay. Maul's alive. That is a world building thing. That
Yeah,
counts.
yeah,
So yeah, so like we do have an established history now. That's a lot more on a more solid footing. Even stuff like the Mandoverse. I've talked about this before. We can talk about detail all you want, but I do think it does adhere to the established spirit of what Aftermath set up.
yeah,
Even if certain details and the details are like is the capital in Coruscant? Did the New Republic arrest 500,000 Imperial officers and send them all on trial? Those details might be a little wonky, but it's like the spirit of Aftermath, I think, very much is endured. I
mhm,
mean, from that as well,
yeah,
and Rebels obviously. Even higher Republic Acolyte, like on the one hand, there is probably a reason Leslie Headland didn't set that show smack dab in the middle of the High Republic initiative. Because then she would have to be like, well, I can't use Avar Chris because they're over here and Vernester's over there during this time period. Oh wait, I
yeah,
want to use the character. Oh no, wait, no, the comics just killed them off. Dang it.
yeah,
But the spirit of High Republic is very much seems to be endured in terms of the aesthetics, the vibe, and Vernester
mhm,
having a light whip. So there's definitely that. I think
mhm,
that is a great point you brought up. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
this is definitely the era of more established continuity, a more established world now than
yeah,
we were very much in that phase one where, we kind of were building the world. We kind of, we can bring in stuff from Legends and if we want and stuff like that. But we kind of were rebuilding the world all over again to a certain extent. And Clone Wars did a lot of that and stuff beforehand. So it's not like we were starting from scratch, but we
mhm,
certainly were starting. And in terms of like lack of tie-ins, I mean, that's definitely a sad thing. I kind of maybe understand because TV shows and movies. So
Mhm.
you know, you never know with like, well, what if they want to do this kind of episode and this kind of episode? And at first I kind of thought it was just a Dave and John thing that they just don't want to share. But they're like, Andor doesn't really have a tie in anything. Acolyte doesn't really have much of a tie-in thing.
Kenobi doesn't really.
No, nobody doesn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, closest thing. I mean, there's stuff that those shows spin off, and that the material
Mhm.
takes, right? Like Bad Batch didn't
Yeah.
have that either. Where it's like the hidden past. That's very that factors into both Kenobi and maybe
Mhm.
they'll factor into some new things in animated shows later on.
I mean,
Um,
both Fallen Order and Survivor do have tie-ins, interestingly enough. But like with the
that's true.
comic and then the novel, the Sam
Yeah,
Wright novel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll be, not to get too much into the future, but I
Yeah.
am wondering when movies come back if they'll bring in those tie-in novels
Yeah.
again, or if they won't even bother. I hope they do. I hope tie-in novels kind of are a thing, even if they are still kind of at a distance, because movies are a little bit of a different beast
Yeah.
than the streaming shows, for certain. Book of Boba Fett had a novelization. Just remember
Right.
that.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, that's definitely some of the cohesive
Mhm.
threads of what I call phase two.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about tie-ins is, and the problem with them is, the film is supposed to be telling the most interesting part of this story, right? It's the one
Mm-hmm.
that's going to get the most eyeballs on it. Rogue One tells the story of it, the rebels, these guys stealing the Death Star plans.
Right.
Catalyst, it's the perfect tie-in. It's the best tie-in, I
Mhm.
would say, because it's eminently readable. It fills in some backstory, and in a novel length form, and James Luciano really writes it really well. It's set a couple decades before, right? And it fills in what was Galen Erso doing with his Death Star project a couple decades before. How did the Empire get the Death Star project from the Separatists? Right, that whole
Ties in some
question.
Clone Wars arcs
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. Right. Yeah.
Those things.
So it's able to pick up on those things, but that aren't necessary for you to enjoy the novel or enjoy the film,
Right.
but are more interesting things us nerds will be interested in,
Mhm.
but gives us some clues to Galen's character and to Krennic's character, Orson's character, and the relationship they had. So
Mhm.
it can do that. I think with Kenobi, though, for example, this is a great example. Kenobi's sitting around. I mean, John Jackson Miller, he has a great Legends novel that he's sort of incorporated into his was it The Empire Strikes Back Bob or New Hope Bob
Right.
with the Tuscans,
Mhm.
the Kenobi novel, but that's him just settling a local pirating dispute or whatever. Now I think it's an interesting reflection also on the events of Revenge of the Sith, but
Oh, of course.
in canon, uh, he's just sitting there watching Luke, making sure he stays out of trouble.
Mhm.
Of course, in paper canon, there is a little bit more to it, right? He's also, there's those 3 comics or 2 comics in the original, the ongoing run.
Mhm.
But yeah, they just aren't. I mean, those aren't not tie-ins to Kenobi intentionally at all. Like they didn't necessarily even know
They
what
might have
was
been
going to happen.
tied into a Kenobi movie that never happened.
They might have been, yeah. And there's some neat references. I mean, with the T16 toy and all that,
Mhm.
and the whole gist of him switching over. I mean, this is another thing, like I mentioned with anything with Anakin and Vader, there are these ideas that get played out in paper that we then see in screen. So
Mhm.
what are we don't know what behind the scenes influence there is, but yeah, I'd be okay if they don't bother with tie-ins, honestly. Like, who's gonna read them? Who's gonna worry about them? I'm worried about the way they hamstring what the tie-ins can say and do. Um, you know,
Oh, the
uh,
authors are gonna be hamstring, not the
yeah, that's what
screenplay.
I mean. That's what I mean. Like the authors, Like the the Phasma novels are the Phasma novels great, but Phasma just doesn't do much in the films either. But I mean, that's the thing. The Phasma novel is mostly important because of for Vi, and what she gets in the Black Spire novel. So, which is of course a tie into a park, but thinner storyline there as mentioned. So there's that. Yeah, I had something I wanted to say, but
Well, I
think
mean,
yeah,
I'll say like
yeah,
what would that Mando novel have been outside of I don't know maybe just an episode of The Mandalorian in book form, right? Like
yeah,
if I mean, I know people say care about Cara Dune and like I don't know, maybe it was, but like I
mhm,
don't know, even if it was like what, just Mando and Cara Dune have an adventure together.
mhm,
Maybe Cara talks about her history, and that's it. It's like
yeah,
the important story to Din is in the show. You know, like
true,
maybe I mean, don't get me wrong. I think if you're gonna use a book, then use a book to like get in deep with the character in a way you maybe don't have time for in the movie.
yeah. I mean,
But
that might be sorry, good.
but that's what probably it would have been, just maybe a deeper character study. But that's just plot wise. Just here's the here's Din and Grogu and going on another
Mhm.
adventure like we see every week. Um,
Yeah,
even I love Living Force. I think it's a great character study
yeah.
on the
I'm
Jedi
almost done.
Council
I'm almost done.
stories. Oh,
Yeah.
we're almost. Oh, someone telling you to be done.
No, I'm almost. No, as in I'm almost done the novel.
Oh yeah, almost done. Yeah.
No,
Oh,
no,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
telling. I'm telling you. Don't worry.
Oh, go. Okay, good, good,
I
good.
think Dom Grosso walked in.
No, don't worry. I'm not gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna spoil
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I'm just saying it's a great character study on the characters, but from like a plot perspective, it's like you know, it's not really advancing much. It's kind of wraps
right.
up and then Phantom Menace has to happen. So the
Yeah,
so which I mean is great. I love it. Like that's what you should use a book for. Like these books should be used for. Like take the established characters that maybe don't get much to do and like really just look into them because the show itself doesn't have time for that.
mhm. I mean that's another thing. It's part of Phantom Menace to 25.
Right.
It's not part of the tie-in. I mean, there were tie-ins to Phantom Menace, right? That was the whole thing with
Mhm.
Shadows of the Empire trying that. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, well, talking about the Mandalorian novel, you want to
Although maybe Grief Kargan could have been in it and the deep dive into him. Just
yeah look at one of look at these other characters. I mean, that might be a way to do it without Gina, is to say, okay, well, what's
or
Kara's?
without Carson or not Carson. Uh, Shoot, who's
Oh
Grief
yeah,
Karga's actor who
oh
passed away?
Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers. Rest in peace, Carl Weathers.
Yeah, that might be better, given that Carl Weathers wasn't problematic, but uh,
People like Grief Karga quite a lot.
yeah,
I do too.
well,
Mhm.
I mean, well, Cara Dune was an interesting character.
That's true. Yeah, I'm
The
sure.
moment that Carson had with her,
That's true.
um,
Yeah.
her story as this rebel commando.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a way to do it, is to tell it on paper, which you don't.
Or tell a Carson Teva story, man. Like,
Well,
how did he meet? How did
yes,
he know about Hera? And how did he know about
please,
Hera and friends with
children,
them?
don't do that to me. I need a Carson Teva story. I need a Carson Teva comic right
He
now,
would actually be
and
great.
I need Paul to take part in have a hand in writing that. But yeah, I mean, it'd be an interesting. Again, that's another thing that they could do. It would be a tie-in that wouldn't really affect the story so much. It would just fill in those few sentences in her life. But then you'd have to give royalties to Gina, and they don't want to do that. So the whole thing. Give royalties to the estate of Carl Weathers. Tell his story from before.
Just
You
because
know
I
that.
don't know if they're going to use the character anymore because he passed away, and I don't
Right.
know.
So that'd be again a great
Mhm.
way of continuing his legacy on, dedicated to Carl. Right? Why not?
Right.
I will say, speaking of Carson, that your point about established canon and it
Mhm.
being that first phase. I mean, us getting familiar with them, with these characters, us getting in our own minds, getting them as fixed parts of this story. And that's the thing with Rebels. That's the thing with the week by week with Rebels. For 4 years, we get to know these characters, so that here's I mean, what the big payoff is, we just have a fully satisfying story of Rebels. That's the main payoff. But another payoff is, when Ezra shows up
Oh
in
yeah.
Ahsoka, it's this wonderful moment. We know they have these two characters we know haven't seen each other for 9 years. that they're really close with Sabine. Or Ezra and Sabine. Another thing, though, again, speaking of established canon, one of the big payoffs is you have this moment where you have Harrison Dula standing before Mon Mothma, and Carson and Chopper are back here, and then 3PO walks in saying, "Hey, a message from Leia Organa," and I think it's cool, but we don't think it's out of place. We think it's completely within the realm of everything. We feel how fitting that is.
I mean, I'll tell you what,
they spent the time developing Hera and even Carson a little bit, and more of Mon Mothma in as part of the story that 3PO is, of course, part of.
I mean, I'll tell you what my kind of holy moly moment is, and I think I've told this on camera many times. It's episode 7 of Mandalorian season 3 with the Shadow Council, and it's like, holy moly, General Commandant Hux and Captain Pelion are talking to Moff Gideon. It's like my brain right now. They're talking about Thrawn. It's like my brain is exploding.
Blue guy.
Especially, I mean, that's more of a me thing as being a Legends fan. Where it's like, holy moly, here is this character that I never thought would ever see the light of day again. Here's this paper canon character in Brendel Hux, and that is what Brendel Hux was for a long time. He first appears in a Rebels tie-in novel, which is kind of also like a little hint to Force Awakens, where holy moly, it's Brendel Hux, and then obviously gets bigger in the Aftermath trilogy, and now he's here on screen. It's like you almost feel like you're one. Oh, look here, look Wikipedia. They do.
Speaking of everything
canon
coming together.
Hello there, Wikipedia. Hello there, indeed. But where were they like? Ray Sloan's almost feel like she's just a episode away. But my point is, sorry, I lost track of thought there.
Brendel Hux.
That Brendel Hux, like holy moly, that to me was a big moment as well in terms of like Brendel Hux was such a big established character, especially more on paper. Just to see him, but also then to see Pelion, who wasn't established, but definitely like established like in Legends, and obviously Mr. Thrawn is coming back. That was another big moment to me. And I'll just say, by the way, I've got a little bit more time before we wrap up. I just want to say, like, I still remember the day Thrawn came back, and that's to me when they felt like that's when the canon felt whole again. Just when Thrawn was part of the Star Wars universe once again. It's just like now things feel complete.
Another CouchCon moment. That's another huge. If you tell the history of Star Wars Celebration, that's a massive moment. I had not read a word. I hadn't even read the comic yet. I hadn't read a word of Out of the Empire. I still haven't read.
I have. I did by then.
I hadn't. I went into Comixology and I bought the comic adaptation of the Thrawn trilogy, but I hadn't read a word of it. I was psyched. I was pumped. And that's partly again the trailer and the energy of knowing that there was this character, this blue character. It was a big deal. The Sherlock character. Yeah, that's a huge. That was such a huge moment.
But no, you're absolutely right. Seeing Mon Mothma played by Genevieve O'Reilly. Love that fact that she's gotten a renaissance.
Yes.
With Hera and Carson and 3PO, it's like kind of this mixing and mingling of the old and new. And obviously beforehand, we just got Andor, and it's like Andor kind of. I don't want to make this too much about Andor or Mon Mothma, but like Andor really made me realize just how much of a blank slate Mon Mothma really was as a character. And I know it's kind of weird to say because like she's in so many books and comics. How could she be a blank slate? Like I made me realize just how little we know about Mon Mothma. With like, it's like the respectable leader of the Rebel Alliance, blah blah blah, and then it's like, but then it's like, oh wait, she had a husband and a family and a daughter. What the heck happened? So yeah, but no, you're absolutely right. Those are definitely some big moments for us here.
And just getting it into our brains. I mean, even with High Republic, it's only been 3-4 years, and I feel a lot of familiarity, and I'm not alone. High Republic social media, High Republic Twitter, all those cosplayers, High Republic Instagram. Yeah, we already feel this connection, and part of that is we felt it instantaneously. There were so many characters that we're all going to latch onto one. I'm so excited to see my guy Reith be part of saving the day with a library. you know, so that'll be fun. Yeah. So I don't. Do you have anything more to say, or are we gonna forget? Because I got a closing question.
No, but I think you brought up a good point of like familiarity kind of happens over time. Like, 1 minute, 1 minute it's very like, holy moly, Palpatine's back, what the heck? And then it's sort of like, oh yeah, of course, you got all this Operation Necromancer stuff there. Oh.
Yeah, that was a good comment. Funny comment there.
But yeah, you can give us the closing question.
Actually, I have two closing questions.
All right.
You say till 2026. Looking at what will be, this is 2.5 questions here. What is going to cap off this year? Why did you say 2026? And what do you think phase 3 is going to be about?
I mean, to be fair, I think Andor season 2 in 2025 might cap up this era. But I say 2026 because if all goes according to plan, we hopefully will be in theaters, sitting in our butts in seats, watching Mandalorian and Grogu on the big screen. So yay!
So
that's basically the return to Star Wars in the theaters. Is why I say that's the end of the era, or the start of the new era.
Yeah,
that's
interesting. You say that because I would say the Art of the Empire film, but maybe they'll collide or something.
I mean, I kind of see Here's the thing. As much as I mean, I'm sure we'll probably figure out when we see the actual mill, but I see Mando not as a continuation of the Mandalorian, the show, but like as almost like a new jumping on, fresh start.
Interesting. That
kind of is setting up the wider movie going audience for the Thrawn thing. And also the fact just Star Wars is back in theaters, so that's why I kind of consider that to be part of the new phase. And I also think, well, I don't think they're going to MCU Avengers Endgame it, where it's like Rey and First Jedi Jed. I'm going to keep calling him that. Are going to like be running up to Thrawn, who's like, Avengers Assemble. I do think that there could be a thematic connective tissue between Mando, Rey, Dawn, Filoni movie, and whatever they decide to put in between. If they decide to put some stuff in between those as well, because again, only the Mandalorian has the release gate, people. For all we know, it could be Mando and then Dawn of the Jedi next. We don't know.
Yeah, for some reason, my mind was all. I guess we got to have Ahsoka season 2.
Oh, there will be an Ahsoka season 2.
Yeah, I'm saying, but we have to have that and then the End of the Empire film.
I'm sure it will happen. I'm
saying, just, I thought my mind is okay. Mandalorian, Grogu, Ahsoka season 2, Heir of the Empire, and that's the end of this phase 2, because that's the end of the Mandoverse. That's kind of where I'm mapping that out. But interesting, you're making a point of also that's the story, the plot, the medium, the return to the big screen, and that'll also then carry into the Dawn of the Jedi and the Rey film. Yeah, we can see that.
Also, I don't predict that. Also, kind of a combination of stuff I may have heard, and also just kind of a combination of how it might go. I don't think they're going to wrap up the Mando film and then start showing the new movie. I think it could very much be Mando, maybe Dawn or Rey, and then I've always heard Filoni's like 2028 or something like that. 20. So there might be a movie or two in between his thing.
So all I'm saying is maybe if we're like phases 2 and 3, they may kind of collide. Is what I'm getting at.
They're definitely building off each other, but in terms of like story plots.
And it's kind of an arbitrary line anyway that we're making. It was less arbitrary 2019 to 2020, although again I include Master and Apprentice as part of this next thing. I will say I wonder, is on the paper side, we're still waiting on what if there is a big ongoing, if there is. Again, I give it my 2 cents. I want it to be between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. If there's a big ongoing, big focus for comics the way there was in these first 2 phases, if you can put it that way, last 10 years, like a big like the big story focus in the original trilogy. That was it. And then there were other things around it, of course. But will there be one? And that's the thing I kind of assume there will be, but what if there isn't? I think that'd be silly. Those things sell better. That's the thing they've got, and that's part of why Interconnected Stories they do them. It's why Marvel does one every summer. Please stop. I mean the Marvel Comics universe. Like, come on. Every single summer they do a crossover. They do two. They do like an Avengers superhero one and an X-Men
Civil War 3.
Great.
How many Civil Wars does Marvel need?
As many as they'll sell. No. But yeah, they do sell. So will they do that? And then what's if they're High Republic, they've got to do another thing like that eventually. Probably not just yet, but definitely got to give us a break.
Give some time to breathe, people.
Yeah, give us some time to break. 2028. I want to see. I think there's gonna be something. This was just so successful and so, again, I use this word definitive, impactful on those of us who are in the Star Wars world. Even if you haven't read a page of High Republic, you know what it is. You know it matters. And so, and it sold like gangbusters. It sold more than a standalone novel will. So again, who knows? I wonder what the strategic direction will be. But yeah, because that's the thing. What will be the same? What will change? Things that I haven't thought of. Again, it's what the impact of a return to theaters is gonna have. Maybe it's some hybrid. Maybe it's some hybrid of phases 1 and 2, where
I'm sure probably
where because there's still gonna be live action shows.
Oh yeah.
Assuming Lucasfilm can handle it, right? That's
right.
the thing. They drew down. I mean, we've debated back and forth ad nauseum what the lesson of Solo is, but one of the things is maybe they clearly can't run as powerful of a ship as Marvel, and they aren't going to try, and that's fair. You just do what you can do and stay within your limits. But that's the question: is what's going to happen to streaming shows if they're now making all these movies? And
Marvel's making less of them too, to be fair. So
that's true. They're kind of slowing down. But are the movies going to bring in more revenue to actually expand the company? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's not our job to look at the business side.
I know, but I'm just wondering. It definitely the business side impacts what stories get made.
That's true. I mean, I think if I had to hot take predict the future, Acolyte is going to be multi-season. If it's successful, if the first season really kind of meets whatever expectation.
Is that what kind of the way Leslie has written it? Because we know with Kenobi, with Deborah, one season, that's it. There's one story.
I've heard a lot of things about this being a multi-season show.
That's another point. Sorry.
And
past Skywalker saga. Yeah.
And they're acting like it's a multi-season show compared to Kenobi. And even then it's new characters and they got 100 years. And what, they're gonna cover 100 years and 100 seasons? I don't think so, but it's
that's true.
I everything that my sniffometer of being online all the time and kind of looking at the tea leaves and stuff like that and blah blah indicates that this is probably a multi-season show unless it just completely bombs. Which it probably won't. But it better not. Yeah, it better not. But that's just the vibe I get. This is a multi-season show. Ahsoka season 2 will happen. Mandalorian is probably going to be more of a movie thing now. I've heard whispers if it does really well, they might make another one before Filoni. So Filoni's might not be happening right away. It's very much an end game, but not like end game. It's not like there's a concrete plan to get there. In terms of new season 1s of shows, I don't know, maybe, but I do think Acolyte's going to be our Mando flagship show for Disney Plus for a couple of years. So that's kind of I do think a hybrid of you got the individual films that kind of switch storylines around. You got Acolyte ongoing. You got maybe like, Acolyte, Andor, Ahsoka, and then Acolyte again, because obviously if there is going to be a season 2, they still have to write it. And then, that's and then whatever the heck the books and comics do as they do. So that's kind of that's what I think phase 3 looks like.
Yeah. This is another great point here. Talk about things we're getting used to.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll have gotten used to it no longer really being about the Skywalker saga, the 9 films.
Right.
With the Rey film, yes, that might be the exception.
But, well, it depends on how they market it.
Yeah, depends on how they market it. Depends on what direction it goes into. But yeah, it's true. We're gonna have gotten used to the fact that there's just things outside, and our focus will be on things outside. So, got to. I had a second question. I don't know. I'm gonna kind of modify it.
Go ahead. You can ask as much as
in just the closing thing. Looking back on these 10 years. I know the answer for what your favorite kind of real world thing is. I have a good guess. So I'll ask, what's your favorite kind of real world moment over the last 10 years? And what's your favorite story moment in paper canon over the last?
What do you mean by real world moment? Because I could always say the Celebration Anaheim where I went to the IHOP party. That was probably my favorite. That was probably my favorite moment.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite real world moment. Just in terms of like a fandom experience, that's never gonna get beat until it happens again. Story moment. Oh my. Ooh. Probably that final space battle in Rogue One is probably still my favorite story
in
moment.
Paper canon.
Oh, I mean, I thought just in canon in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Canon in general. Huh.
Or paper canon specifically.
Paper canon.
Maybe. Okay, I want to modify it. What was being the most emotionally impactful moment in paper canon?
Oh, that's a trick one. I remember really liking Aftermath 3 when it came out back in the day. Although that Vader moment was also, the Vader moment was always go-to for me as well. I don't know.
You pick a tie. You have a tie. You can
probably a tie between Aftermath 3 and
the Battle of Jakku, or
the Battle of Jakku, all that, and the Vader moment. In terms of those 2 moments, probably my favorite.
My tie is so far. This might change. Yeah, the Vader, the ongoing Vader crossover. Yeah, it's the first. That's the first flowering of prequelism, right? Oh,
well, those Vader comics were very prequel heavy.
They were incredibly, but this was set set after A New Hope, and he's getting these flashbacks to the Senate hall or whatever, and be all, I'm pregnant, and that moment, that, and I've only cried once reading a Star Wars. I've cried watching a Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, The High Ground, Wreath getting knighted, and just a reflection on, here where the history, the lessons of history, the lessons of tradition, everything I love about The Last Jedi also, but this character who I identify with so much is someone who cares about the deeper questions and exploring them, and exploring what people in the past have said and done in similar and very different situations, and say, okay, he is now empowered to step out and make decisions based on, contribute to the galaxy in really meaningful ways. And we know it coming up, and it's gonna be I think it's gonna be in a comic. It's gonna start in a comic. It's gonna be a novel eventually. Just he's gonna the echoes of the Echo Stones. You can research those things and say, have a real contribution to who the Jedi are and who they ought to be. And I'm really looking forward to that. So his knighting was that first great moment, that first great step in affirming that, because he's not a character that's stuck in the past. He's not a character that's stuck in history. He's a character who knows how to learn from history, and that's something we desperately need in our culture in our time right now. So, yeah, Reese Silas, Daniel Jose Older in Midnight Horizon. Give me this moment. Why not? Yeah. Do you have anything further to say? Anything? Any final comments?
Nope. Just gotta be interesting where the Star Wars canon looks like in the next 10 years. How expansive
Yeah.
is it gonna be? How much time have we truly covered now? By the time we are here again in 10 years. Will we be here again in 10 years? I hope so.
I
Yeah.
forgot one more moment.
Oh,
The most impactful. Qui-Gon, because it is the light.
I was surprised you didn't say that the first thing.
Yeah,
Um
that was a great one too. So yeah.
But yeah, what will Star Wars canon look like in 10 years? And where will there be more? Will it start to unravel? Will there be more contradictions? Will it be able to keep hold? Who knows?
Will podcasts exist?
Yes. Will we be
I
doing
was
this
going to say,
forever?
come back here 10 years from now, but who knows? Will podcasts exist? Will the internet still exist? Dystopia.
Well, I
No.
hope so, 'cause we could talk
Yeah,
about it.
that'll be interesting. What will kind of these fandom conversations look like?
Mhm.
What will happen? Things have changed in the last 10 years, so who knows? But last 10 years ago, a podcast was purely an audio thing. You downloaded it, you stuck it onto your MP3 player. Maybe Spotify was starting to, or those other ones were starting to. Well, yeah, podcatchers were definitely a big thing. But I remember, yeah, Full of Sith and all those, you stuck it in Star Wars Underworld,
Mhm.
channel 1138 and all that. Yeah, you hopped on a plane, gave it a listen, you landed, and you knew a bit more about Star Wars. Now you go live on YouTube.
Yeah.
and it's on YouTube, and this is still called a podcast for some reason. Why not? Media, that all changes too. So yeah, who knows? Always in motion is the future. Who
Always
said
in
that?
motion. The future is.
There we go. All right, but for now, that is a good place to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us in the comments. Please let us know, what is your favorite moment or what have been your favorite moments in paper canon, in the canon so far, in the fandom, in the real world, in cons. Definitely, yeah, Celebration. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, Celebration clearly was mine. The High Republic panel in Anaheim. My word, was something. Yeah. So definitely, yeah. New York Comic Con was fun too. But anyways, yeah. Let us know what your favorite moment was. There's another thing. Also, all the tales of the Empire, tales of whatever.
Oh
Different
yeah.
things, filling those out, and there'll be time. Yeah, I'll go back and fill those things out. Just picking that up. Filling out things in the saga sequel trilogy. Why not? Anyway, please let us know, what you think of the main themes and trends in canon so far, where you think it's going in the next 10 years. How are you going to celebrate A New Dawn and The Force Awakens turning 10 and Revenge of the Sith turning 20? Oh my goodness. How are you going to celebrate? I'm going to be in Japan, I hope. Hope you will be as well. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, definitely comment below on all these boxes, all the comment boxes on all the socials, etc. Let us know on the socials. We'll get to that in a second. Please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Where you can get Tractor Beam, you can get Star Wars Underworld, the flagship, you can get all that good stuff. So in the meantime, I'll get to that again in a second. Where can they find you on the internet, Joel?
You can find me at JID2021. Get JID2021 on Twitter. Of course, at IonCanonPod. Again, EYEONCANONPOD. And of course, on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Yay.
There you go. You can find me on Twitter at NEUG45, on Instagram and Threads at MNEUG1138. A lot of food, a lot of foodie. I'm full on. It's a full on foodie account. I'm going to change that. I'm going to actually spin it off into its own Beaches TO foodie account. But yeah, for now, check that out. We're gonna probably should tweet out something about the Star Trek, the Discovery Series finale on Thursday. Whatnot. But yeah, you can follow us Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at IonCanonPod, EYEONCANONPOD. And of course on Tractor Beam this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. The comics keep coming. They keep coming out every Wednesday. That's how it works. The stories keep rolling along, and so there's 4 of them. 2 of them, all of them set before the Phantom Menace. Two of them set 200 years before the Phantom Menace, but that's great. High Republic Adventures, and yeah, Darth Maul and Jango Fett, and then Saber for Hire. So yeah, check that out right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Yeah, give us a follow there, and of course here on the Star Wars, yeah, again the flagship. So Iron Cannon, sorry, this is Iron Cannon Tractor Beam Wednesday, the flagship at the SW Thursday night. And then Monday, then next Monday, again, we'll get into that. Yeah, final predictions for the Acolyte. Final reflections on the Jedi and light and dark and balance and all that stuff. And just
what are the Sith up to?
What are the Sith up to? Are we going to see the Sith? Who is that guy? Who is the zipper face? Who knows?
Is this Darth Plagueis' secret origin story?
Or is it a bait and switch?
Yes.
Who knows? What's the story about who's actually killing the Jedi?
Yeah.
All those fun questions as we dive into go full podcast area here on your home for the High Republic on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. Going full on talking about the Acolyte. It's been fun. It's been a great episode too tonight. Definitely enjoyed diving in, looking back, and yeah, we got more where this came from as well. Just the kind of in-depth conversations. So please stay tuned, stay locked on the Iron Cannon podcast for in-depth discussions on the High Republic and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. Again, next week, final predictions for the Acolyte. But until then, let's blow this thing and head home.